Hello, everybody, and welcome to the CertiCraft. We are here on episode 10. I can't believe we've hit double digits here, and really excited here to have two amazing representatives from ACCRES, the Association for Association for Canadian Cannabis Retailers. Is that correct? Did I get? I'll ask you guys to say it properly when I introduce you later. My name is Sami. I'm the CEO of CertiCraft. We are on a mission to help craft cannabis producers transition into and thrive within the regulated market. Our flagship product is a seed-to-sale system that makes it really easy to stay on top of all your records once you are licensed. The CertiCraft is a series where we talk about the legal craft cannabis industry, what's going well, what's not going well, what we can do to make things better. And every episode, we bring different guests to share their perspectives, people who we respect and really want to bring their perspectives to the table. And this episode is certainly no different. It is my pleasure to introduce to you guys Jaclynn and Alfred. Maybe I'll just turn the floor over to you guys real quick. If you guys could each just give us a 1-minute intro about who you are. I'd love it if you could introduce yourselves.
My president, would you like to go first?
Sure, I can go. I'm Alfred Schaefer. I am the president of ACCRES, the Association of Canadian Cannabis Retailers. I'm also a co-owner of Rural Leaf Cannabis, based out of Smithers, Houston, and Valemount. And I've been on the board of directors for a couple of years, pretty involved with government relations, and just really stoked to be here. And that's me in a nutshell. I'm joining you from Smithers, BC. It's another beautiful sunny day.
Nice. Excellent. I'm Jaclynn Pehota. I'm the executive director at the Association of Canadian Cannabis Retailers. We'll call it ACCRES because it's a mouthful. Also a misnomer because all of our members are in BC. So I am the ED there. I've been working in the regulated cannabis space, since its inception. I was, an advocate in the medical market as well. I'm really excited to be here, and I'm really excited to be your 10th episode, and B, I believe your first retail guest.
Yeah, first retail guest. I was commenting earlier today that we at CertiCraft, we don't really touch retail. Our focus is on the production side of the supply chain, and we don't really know much about what's important on the retail side. So I'm really excited to learn here today because retail is critical for the craft cannabis industry. So curious to learn what you guys think is important that we should be talking about here today. Before I get into that, I realized I forgot to do a few housekeeping items. For all of you in the audience here today, we have a chat where we'd love it if you came and say hi. And if you had any comments or thoughts throughout, please share them there. If you ever have any questions for Alfred or Jaclynn, we have a dedicated question section. And please ask your questions there. If you see other questions you like, please upvote them. We have 15 minutes at the end for questions and answers. And what we'll do is we'll just go in order of the most popular questions, whatever has had the most upvotes. We'll just go through in that order until we either run out of questions or run out of time. I think that's it as far as housekeeping goes. Thank you all for being here, and thank you, Jaclynn and Alfred, for being here. Like I said, super excited to learn about the world of retail. So let's shift into the discussion proper. The way we always start these episodes is to ask a pretty simple question, which is what do you guys think is going well so far in the world of legal craft cannabis?
Alfred, do you want to talk a little bit about that from an actual operational store perspective before we jump into the more abstract part of it?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I guess the main thing I can say is that cannabis is legal, so I guess we have to start with that. And the fact that we have access to any craft cannabis at all at this point, when we first started, it was a lot of really big producers. So that's, it's great that we have any access to it. Obviously, we can talk about this later, but we'd like to have a lot more access. We'd like to see a lot more diversity in that market. And from our perspective, it's nice to see that we are able to engage with the policymakers, and they seem to be listening to what we're saying and taking our recommendations to heart. So that's always good to see. Do you want to jump in here, Jaclynn?
I just have a quick question for you, Alfred. When you say policymakers in this case, are you talking about the BCLDB specifically, or broader than that?
Yeah, the BCLDB. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we've been lucky enough to have like phone calls on a regular basis with them, and they've been listening to what we have to say, and they've been asking us for advice on policy that they're rolling out, and that
makes me really happy. Yeah, because I've heard otherwise from other people saying that the BCLDB has been very much like, no, we know what we're doing. We're not really going to engage. So this is super refreshing and makes me happy to hear that you're having a different experience where they are actually reaching out and wanting to integrate your perspective into their decision making.
Yeah,
sure. It took a little while to get there, but I think after seeing how many members we had and seeing how we engaged with them and seeing that we obviously have the health of the sector at our forefront. They definitely have listened to us, and we're not coming at them with like only problems. We're trying to be solution oriented, and that's how we always approach all of our conversations. And I think they appreciate that. So it's been good so far.
Yeah, we had a really fortunate experience. The first interactions that we had with the LDB were actually with some of their category managers, and they were really open. They had conceded that they didn't really have a meaningful understanding of what they were doing, and then they were running into challenges related to like what the market is looking for. So there was, initially, when we first started really ramping ACCRES up, there were some really good conversations on that front. And the result of that has been, a relatively consistent two-way dialogue between ourselves and the distributor. The other great thing is that from the LCRB and the Cannabis Secretariat side, we have a group of, really dedicated and passionate public servants who I think, want this sector to work, and they have been incredibly responsive. Obviously, we're going to ask for the moon. There's a lot of things in this sector that need working on and need focus. But I will offer them praise because they have been remarkably responsive, especially if you look at the other provinces across Canada. Our access has been really quite awesome. So that's a great thing. And we've seen some relatively rapid movement in terms of policy change. If anybody who works with government knows that the pace is maybe
glacial.
Yeah, there we go. That's the word. So, to see things like, changes to the window opaquing, delivery, click and collect. These are, initiatives that have come up from a retail perspective that we've been really passionate about at ACCRES. To see those things, materialize, even if they're not perfect. That responsiveness has been really positive. So I think that building that relationship with the regulators has been really quite amazing. And then other things that are going well, we're starting to see municipalities that were originally very hesitant on, hosting legal cannabis stores start to come around. Places that initially banned legal cannabis retail outright completely are starting to, revisit those bylaws and, opening up those markets, which is really important to the success of the legal industry. Because we're leaving big access deserts, right? Like I'm thinking Surrey and Richmond are great examples where you have 660,000 people without access to legal cannabis. That is a very, that's a nice little handout to the unregulated market. Real talk, right? Like it is. So, us having a footprint across this province and having a presence and giving people the opportunity to choose a legal option, I think is really important. And I'm glad that the municipalities are kind of moving along, at least on the retail front.
So are Surrey and Richmond, to use those examples, are they like now changing their tunes and starting to allow stores to open up there?
I've heard some rumblings out of Surrey. I don't think Richmond has said anything in that vein, but North Vancouver, West Vancouver, Coquitlam, Maple Ridge, places that were really hesitant initially have, opened their doors to legal cannabis. And I think that's, like I said, very positive in the Lower Mainland. We had a real issue, not to be Fraser Valley focused, but we did have a really significant issue with, municipalities not allowing for legal cannabis. For a year after 2 years, now we're in 3 years after legalization. So, and you can't really blame the municipalities; they don't get much out of it. So,
yeah, and there legitimately has been a lot of stigma around cannabis. A lot of people have brought up thinking that cannabis is one of the worst things in the world and will lead to the dark side, so to speak. And if that's all you know and that's what you were taught, and you never had an opportunity to be exposed to other viewpoints, to, you know, the real science behind cannabis and a lot of, you know, the medical aspects of cannabis, then why would you want it in your community? It takes a lot of learning and education to actually realize that, oh, maybe a lot of what I learned growing up is not actually accurate.
100%. And the other thing to consider is that, like, you know, municipalities, people, the places that have banned this activity, it's always a, like, you know, pearl clutching, like, what about the children, you know,
yeah, cannabis
in the community. I mean, the irony is that, you know, from a safety, a public safety perspective, licensed retailers are kind of an antidote rather to those issues, right? Like when we see licensed retailers move into communities, youth access drops. Like, we know that. That's a fact of the matter. So I think it would be really nice to see, you know, more municipalities who are hesitant on the file open up their doors and welcome us. With delivery, we're now able to go into those spaces legally and service citizens in Richmond and Surrey from a Vancouver-based location, which is nice. But it would be great to have an actual storefront for them to be able to patronize.
Yeah. Cool. Is there anything else that you would say is going well on the retail side of the craft cannabis industry?
Alfred, thoughts?
And it's okay if the answer is no. I mean, I will say that already on the retail side, there's a lot more to talk about that's going well. Like, generally with the production side, though, what's going well has mostly been limited to, like, cannabis is legal now. Like, you don't go to jail for just enjoying this thing. And most of the conversation is really focused on, okay, well, here's what we can improve and what we can work on to make things better. There's been a lot of celebration of kind of the willingness of the BC government to work on programs like direct delivery, like Farmgate, so on and so forth, but it really has focused on the challenges that exist. So it makes me really happy that we're already still talking on some of the positives that are taking place on the retail side, because it means that there's wins happening on that in that side of the sector, which I think is amazing and is refreshing to kind of have these positives be shared. So don't feel like you you have to share more positives if there aren't any more positives to share.
Well, I mean, I think that I would speak to exactly what you said, Farmgate and direct supply, and then potentially a move towards consumption spaces. Like, to me, those are very hopeful conversations that we're having. I mean, they've committed to Farmgate and direct supply, so that's our regulator is committed to those programs, so that's really heartening. And then, like I said, consumption is a very exciting thing. I think that there's an understanding of the importance of consumption from our regulatory body, but getting us across the line, I think, is going to take some creative thinking. So that's another positive thing. Like, the fact that we're even having a conversation about, the potential for consumption spaces is heartening to me, because there's a real challenge there, because we're dealing with, indoor smoking and, tobacco, 30 years of tobacco, regulations that were meant to completely diminish people's ability to consume things from a combustion perspective. So the fact that we're even having the conversation, I think, is also positive. So, I mean, we'd like to have it faster, obviously, because that's always urgent. There's always urgency, but
my understanding of the consumption talks is that indoor smoking is going to be absolutely prohibited. It's only going to be outdoor that's allowed in the regulations that are being discussed and considered by the BC Cannabis Secretariat's office. There's a few, like, hard restrictions that they're not willing to cross, that being one of them, and then outside of that, they're very open to, like, what it can look like. Mm-hmm. And my understanding is the first iteration is going to really focus on Farmgate and having a tandem consumption lounge as part of a Farmgate store. And I'm curious, so from your perspectives as more traditional retailers that aren't tied to a particular production facility, is there a lot of desire amongst retailers to have consumption lounges in as part of their business models and business plans?
Yeah, definitely. Like, it's something that I think most of our members have talked about right from the beginning. Like, that was always kind of something that we've all been interested in. I mean, probably lots of people have been to, like, Amsterdam cafes or what have you, mm-hmm. and being able to do something of that style would, it would open up so much more for us as retailers, and it's just a totally different avenue that we could explore. So I mean, the fact that we're having these conversations and they're talking about rolling these things out is really amazing. I think there's a lot of I don't envy them, because obviously smoking indoors is not really something that the government is super in favor of. Yeah, I mean, I'll be excited to see how it all shakes out, and it's definitely something that we've all been looking forward to. I know like a lot of retailers have even, when thinking about the spaces that they have or that they're operating in, they've kind of made concessions for the future plans for those kinds of things. Like we certainly have with some of our locations. So hopefully it comes through.
And have you guys at ACCRES, have you talked with the BC Secretariat's office about the Cannabis Secretariat's office, about consumption lounges in relation with retail stores at all, or is that a conversation that's yet to happen?
No, I've engaged with them on that front and had that conversation. I mean, I appreciate the focus on farm gate. Creating viable farm gate outlets is going to require making those farm gate spaces a destination. So I feel like part of the conversation around consumption lounges is tourism, right? Like the reason that consumption lounges are critical is threefold. I mean, there's public safety, because they prevent like intermodal transport issues where you're purchasing an intoxicating product and then driving to a place to consume it and then potentially driving back and da-da-da-da-da. So that is something that can be remedied. It's part of the reason we have bars. The second reason is, people need a place to do this that is not nuisance creating, right? Like you can't smoke in social housing, you can't smoke if you're in supportive housing, you can't smoke in most condos or apartments. All of those things mean that people are looking for fun, vibrant, cool spaces to go, like local people to have that opportunity and that option, which I think is very fair. We have lots of options for folks who like to share social beverages and have like an alcoholic drink, and they don't have to do it out of a paper bag behind a fence if they don't want to. I mean, that's the choice. If you want to go that direction, no judgment. And then the third thing is, I mean, I genuinely believe that without consumption spaces, the potential, the potential of the market to capture tourism from an international and even a national perspective, like drawing people from other parts of Canada, is very stunted by the fact that we don't have any space for people to consume those products in. And I mean, like, I think from the retailer's perspective, it's important for us to remember that there are lots of ways to consume cannabis. Like, we don't necessarily need smoking lounges. Consumption can be, beverages. It can be,
eating a brownie,
infused food products. Like, there's a whole bunch of creative ways we could, really make this exciting.
I imagine there's probably some interesting things that can emerge around taking cannabis sublingually, because that, I imagine, could have a fast effect on your body in a way where digesting traditionally is going to be really slow. So maybe there's something around there, some kind of innovation there to allow somebody to have a fast onset while not smoking, so you can have an indoor space that works within the regulations that the BC government is comfortable with. I'd be curious to see if anything emerges there.
Yeah, I mean, I'm very hopeful that if nothing else, I would really, really like to see my retailers allowed to use their retail spaces for other activities besides the sale of cannabis. Like, I think it would be incredible if they could use those spaces for education and social applications. Like, I think that would be very a benefit to the community, and also stigma busting, right? Like, when you start to create community hubs, and I know that there are concerns related to it being an intoxicating substance or whatever, but cannabis comes with a particular kind of culture that is a big part of people's lives in BC, right? Whether or not they're consumers or not, the cannabis culture in this province touches everybody.
Yeah. So what are a few things, like, you just touched there on the desire to have cannabis retail spaces get used for educational workshops, or maybe an event, a concert, or whatever it might be. That's like not just selling cannabis. What are a few other agenda points, I will say, that retailers, that you guys at ACCRES think is really important, that you guys are working on, that you think need to change in order to make things a lot more viable and vibrant for small scale retail shops?
you want to talk about federal versus provincial? Alfred, do you want to talk a little bit about the federal advocacy and concerns that we have as retailers first?
Yeah, I mean, to like answer, I guess, directly to your question, it would be like, yeah, it would be great to be able to host events, and even like on the education piece, like even, you know, fun things like, hey, here's how to roll a joint or whatever, and having that, like that ability to just actually showcase the product a little bit more. Because right now, like, you know, you can't even show the weed in the store unless you have those smell jars and those kinds of things. Like there's no way to actually even like touch it or, you know, look at it without it being encased in some kind of protective thing, which is, I mean, I understand why they've done that. So like, I get it, but you know, this stuff isn't like radioactive. This is a plant. This is something that's been around. Like you can eat fresh weed and you're not going to get stoned. So it's a little bit hard sometimes to like get on board with all those things. And I think it's probably something that will change over time, but just like having those kind of abilities to showcase the product a bit more and, you know, have people in the store and do things that are a little bit more fun and also educational like that. And I think really that's what they've entrusted us with is to educate people about what it is and what the effects are. And, you know, I think if they just give us a little bit more leverage in that regards, it would be super helpful for all of us, and especially for bringing down that stigma. Because like you said, like this stuff isn't, you know, it's not poisonous. It's like,
and do you feel like there is desire from the BC government to meet you there, or is this like does it feel more like an uphill battle where you're really having to fight for this?
I mean, go ahead, Jeff.
Do you want me to jump in there? Or?
Yeah, you go ahead.
I mean, I think that it's important for us to think about, you know, jurisdiction to some degree. So like a lot of the regulations that kind of infantilize the public, and that's kind of, I mean, I don't mean to be pejorative, but like things like, you know, the 30-gram carry limit and the like edible limit, those are like big concerns from our perspective at a federal level. You know, and I don't really know if there's any appetite on the part of the the current sitting government in British Columbia to really, you know, be advocates for the sector in that kind of capacity. I don't really
as in to advocate for the federal government to change their policies.
That's right. Yeah, I don't really see you know, them being, you know, particularly strong on that. Like we haven't seen any indication that that's a policy initiative that they're going to be undertaking or they have undertaken particularly. So that's really, you know, that's an unfortunate thing. I think it would be nice to see, you know, on the part of our elected officials, kind of a matched enthusiasm that we see on the part of the folks who are actually, you know, working as, you know, public servants. You know, unfortunately, cannabis has kind of been a little bit orphaned, even in British Columbia. Like we don't have anybody that I can think of that's been a really strong voice for this sector from an elected perspective. So I think that would be a really nice kind of shift to see. And I don't care what party that comes from. Like it could be from anybody in the political arena, as long as they have the best interests of the sector at heart, specifically the BC sector, right? Because I think that's it's important for us to recognize that, you know, there's the Canadian cannabis industry, but there's also the BC cannabis sector, and those things are, you know, the health of those things are, you know, directly corollary, but they are also separate. You know, they're just by nature of the fact that we have a lot of challenges in BC that we don't have in other places in Canada. It's just a different landscape. So that's something that I think would be really nice to see, you know, our elected officials step up on, because I think that those kinds of regulations, they are not serving the project of legalization the way that they were intended to. I think that, you know, they were, you know, created with, you know, the best of intentions. I'm not, excuse me, casting aspersions on anybody's motives, like, you know, from a lawmaking perspective. But, you know, we've seen these things roll out. They've had, you know, pretty strong impacts, especially on the production side. And I mean, it would be really nice to see them revisited with a lens that's less, you know, prohibitionist and more oriented towards, you know, economic development and realizing the potential of the sector. That would be something that I would like to see.
And so as you're talking more and more there, I'm getting the sense that you're talking less about the specific examples you gave of 30-gram carry limit, so on and so forth, And more so, you're just talking like broadly, there's a lot of different policies that have been made on a federal level that really limit and stifle economic development, because they're really focused in this like fear-based modality kind of way of thinking of we don't want the children to be hurt, we don't want this to be hurt, and so we're gonna do XYZ, even though the science doesn't really show that that's a real thing to be concerned about. Am I interpreting that correctly with my statement there?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I always say that, like, you know, the biggest challenge I think we face in the cannabis sector is that we have never really quantified the risk that we're trying to mitigate as a country. Like, so to me, I'm not sure what, you know, a lot of our regulations were actually designed to, you know, prevent, like if we're trying to prevent harm, if we don't have a target that's been well defined as to, you know, what preventing harm looks like, then you can continue to pile on as many regulations as you want and, you know, regulate this up the wazoo. But I mean, it's not necessarily having the outcomes that were desired, and it's having, you know, unintended consequences of, you know, crushing the industry, you know, under a burden that is, you know, I mean, I would assert is maybe not necessary. Like, we look at other jurisdictions that have done this safely with a much lower regulatory burden and barrier to entry. So, you know, that's something that is always top of mind for me, you know, realizing the economic potential here, and, you know, being able to really take advantage of our first mover advantage nationally, like as the first people, like the first nation in the whole world that decided to throw prohibition at the window and you know, and go in the right progressive direction on drug policy. Like, it would be awesome for us to accompany that with an economic lift for all Canadians. Like, I don't think that's too much to ask, right? Like, that's cool.
And I mean,
technically second country though. Uruguay beat us.
Yeah, that's
yeah,
oh, I'm so embarrassed.
Uruguay legalized cannabis like 5 years before Canada, I think. 4 years.
Oh my God! Sorry, Uruguay.
They're a very small country that a lot of people forget about, though. Everybody seems to think Canada's first, but we're not.
so Canadian.
I mean, and the other unintended consequence there too is that you're opening that space up to the unregulated market. So I mean, if that's, you know, if what you're saying you're doing is trying to keep public safety in mind, then that's probably not what you're actually hoping for. And that's what is happening with all these kind of onerous regulations that they have, unfortunately.
Yeah. So what are a few examples of like regulations or policies that retailers specifically are really struggling with in Canada, or I guess more specifically in BC, given that even though your acronym says Canadian retailers, you only have BC membership.
The organization predates legalization. It was named before this actually happened. Do you want to talk a little bit about like the day-to-day impacts that some of this stuff has on you as a store owner?
Yeah, I'd love to hear that personally, because like just to give you some perspective, like, you know, we at CertiCraft, we're just focused on production. We have probably 80 different licensed producers that we work with now, and, you know, we really understand the struggles that both growers and processors are dealing with on a daily basis, and like we live and breathe that world. But then on the day-to-day side of the retail world, like, I know nothing about that personally, and I'm guessing that a lot of our audience doesn't really know much about that either. And yeah, if you can just help us understand, like, what is the day-to-day like, and what types of things cause you to struggle, what kind of things create challenges, I think that would be so helpful and appreciated.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, so from a federal perspective, like the biggest thing that I'm sure all of our members struggle with is the possession limit. Like, the fact that we can only sell 30 grams of cannabis or an equivalent to 30 grams of cannabis at one time is like the most awkward conversation that our bud tenders have every single day. Like, people come in and they like want to buy an ounce, and then they want to buy a couple drinks, and they want to whatever, and then you hit that 30 gram limit like so fast. And people, like, the public doesn't understand that portion of it. Like, they don't, like, in trying to explain it to them is like, okay, well, there's these rules that the federal government has, and then you try and explain to them, and they're like, well, what? I can just go buy as much weed as I want from this guy over here. Why am I being limited? And I mean, it's such like an arbitrary and hilarious rule, because like I could walk into a liquor store and buy like 10 liters of vodka and just drown myself in the parking lot. But then at the same time, if I wanted to buy like, say, 2 ounces of weed, like, there's no way that I could even, I couldn't possibly, maybe I could smoke all that if I really put in a concerted effort. But even then, I would just be like super greened out. Maybe, I don't even know. But the point being is, like, there doesn't really seem to be any rationale behind why we have these rules. And right now, I mean, it stifles so much, and it's just such an awkward conversation. Like, you're trying to explain to the customers, and usually, like, people actually get pretty angry about this at sometimes, and then you're trying to explain that this is sort of out of our hands and we don't really have anything to do with it. But anyways, that 30-gram possession limit, it just seems like an arbitrary number that someone in Health Canada came up with. And I mean, unfortunately, the unintended consequences of that are a lot. Like, it's, that's the thing that'll push someone to go to the black market. And also, like, a lot of retailers are probably not following that rule. Like, someone will come in, they'll buy an ounce, and then they want more. So they'll probably walk out of the store and they'll come back in and they'll buy another ounce. So I don't know if it's even actually doing anything. And I think that's one thing that hopefully they can understand. And it's something that we're really hoping to change with this federal review that's coming up. And it's something that we're pushing. Another big one is the 10 milligram edible limit. Like, right now, if you buy edibles, the most you can get in one package is 10 milligrams. And again, this is a totally arbitrary rule. And it's something that we cannot compete with the unregulated market on this, because number one, like, the price point is just too high. Like, if you're selling your edibles 10 milligrams at a time, like, I think Jaclynn was saying that the cost of edibles is like, what, I don't know, 300. Like, it's basically more expensive than
THC. Basically, if you're buying from the legal market, which is kind of a flex, you can
exactly.
bring your gram of legal edibles to a party and be like, yeah, $300.
Yeah, I've got caviar and I've got these edibles here. Like, it's just like, it totally stifles the market, and it's really unfortunate because like, the edibles within the legal market are actually, there's so many amazing ones, and like, people are making really, really great products, like really tasty. And just, it doesn't even make any sense too, because like, we're selling, we've got these gummies that are 10 milligrams per package, and then you've got a thing of oil right beside it that has 1,000 milligrams of THC in it. And it's just the fact that it's in a different form that, like, what is, I don't understand. Like, I can still get all of it, I just can't get it in gummy form, or I can't get it in drink form. So I mean, that rule is like, it just doesn't really, there's not a lot of sense behind it. So I mean,
yeah, it just forces you to take it in a particular form that might not feel good to you, whereas I like to, like, slice up a gummy and that feels good to me, and just to, like, suck and chew on it really slowly, whatever it might be for that individual. And
exactly.
Yeah, and these things infantilize the public, right? Like, I am loath to draw, comparisons to liquor, because that's what always happens here. But like, as Alfred said, like, I can go into the liquor store and buy enough liquor to kill me and everyone I've ever met in my entire life, and all they will say to me is, "Ma'am, would you like some help to your vehicle?" Like, they want and there are lots of liquor products that are, I would say, not even from a subjective perspective, relatively appealing to youth. Like, Hires vodka at premix can, like root beer, that kind of thing, a child might find appealing. But I mean, we don't say to Hires vodka, like, concoction, oh, you can only sell that in a 10 milligram or rather 10 milliliter container, because what if kids get it? We trust that our adult people in the public can make these decisions and protect their kids, et cetera, et cetera. And I understand obviously things like candy, where it's not necessarily obvious that there's they might be infused or whatever. But I mean, like, I do genuinely believe that there's some responsibility on the part of parents to ensure that people are not accessing a legal intoxicating substance. I mean, right? Like, that seems reasonable to me.
And there's like quite a few restrictions when it comes to packages that make it so that, like, if a 5-year-old came across like a thing of candy, from the legal cannabis world. A, they wouldn't know it was candy because it's made to look really ugly, and B, if they tried to open it, good luck. I struggle with with the stuff that you buy in the legal world. Like, I have a hard time with the cannabis packaging. Like, a 5-year-old's not going to get in there.
and that's exactly it. Like, we have these mechanisms in place. I feel like that's we have controls around things that are dangerous to kids, and we trust the public to know that and to be cognizant of it. And I mean, like, real talk, the outcome of children, getting their hands on cannabis is not a positive one, but I mean, it's nobody's going to die probably. Like, we've never had an instance where anybody has had, any kind of mortality related to kids being exposed to cannabis, which is not the case with alcohol. People die all the time from alcohol, intoxication and poisoning, etc. So I think, again, these are things where, like, we kind of have to make our decision, right? Like, because I think that in order to achieve the project of legalization, like what we intended to set out, so like capturing the economic activity, protecting youth, and undermining the unregulated market, I think that we have to kind of make a decision as to how we're going to accomplish that, right? Like, I mean, unfortunately, it is a fact of the matter that marketing restrictions and the edible dosage limits and things like the 30-gram possession and carry limit are creating an environment where choosing the legal system is potentially less convenient and less easy than if you are going to go and access cannabis the way that you've always done in the unregulated space. So my retailers need tools in order to entice the public into the legal system and change those consumer behaviors, because that's fundamentally what we're talking about. We're talking about a shift in consumer behavior. We would not have an unregulated market if there wasn't a market for unregulated product. So convincing the public that the legal option is the good option, is the option that they want to, means that we have to accommodate, in that market what the public actually wants. And I think that would be something to realize, like, setting aside the idea of like cannabis stigma and the prohibitionist mindset, giving consumers what they want in a regulated framework. All things being equal, most people will choose to do the legal thing. But I mean, right now we're not in a position where all things are equal. So that's the big challenge, right? Like, we're not, and I mean, something that else is positive, I think that we should point out, I can frame this with, is like, we're starting to see that definite improvement in quality in the regulated space. Like, it is, getting to a place where we have, excellent options in all product categories, where I would, recommend that people go and try out those products. But that is something that has developed in the last 18 months, right? Like, we struggled with quality a lot, and the rollout of legalization, and all of those things, damage consumer confidence. And we have to give our retailers tools to restore that consumer confidence, right?
So I've got a question related to that I'm especially interested in hearing your thoughts on, given that we do work with a lot of craft growers. So now that there are more and more amazing growers who are licensed and are bringing their product to market, I know we have at least 4 or 5 of them here in the audience today. Are retailers doing anything to try to highlight what is craft cannabis that they especially recommend? Because I mean, as a consumer, when you go into a store, just assuming for a moment that you could even see the packaging, which you can't, but assuming for a moment that you could, like, the packaging restrictions make it so that you can't actually, like, say, hey, I am a craft grower, I grow organically using living soil, or I do an aquaponics based system, or whatever it might be that somebody does that, like, really sets them apart, like, which I think is a huge challenge for small scale producers, because in the craft beer world and any other industry, your branding is all about, hey, look at me, I'm craft. Like, this is what I do that's special, and this is what sets me apart from Bud Light, from Miller, from whatever, so on and so forth. And in this world, there really isn't a way to kind of differentiate yourself on that kind of a level from Aurora or Tilray or Canopy Growth, so on and so forth. And that's exacerbated in many different ways through a lot of the restrictions that the federal government has set in place around packaging and around branding and shelf spacing. And so I'm curious, like, how do you guys as retailers think about the craft cannabis industry, and how to highlight the brands and the products that you guys are especially excited about?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. I think a lot of it comes down to the education of our bud tenders, and like, we don't have people in the store that don't like smoking weed. So, they're trying everything out. We obviously have really good discount packages for our employees, and that's a big part of it. Like they're, how they feel about things and how they sell them is a big part of how they're highlighting that. And we definitely, like, we're always like putting the location that where all of the where a product comes from, and we tend to stock a lot of things from BC at our stores in particular, because like a lot of consumers, like, I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but they are looking for stuff from BC, or even specifically very local. It's kind of hard because we're up in the north, so we don't actually have that many producers up here. But if they can get access to those kinds of things, like people come in all the time. Like there was, anyways, kind of a different story, but there was a producer that was supposed to be opening up like in our neck of the woods, and people are like constantly asking about that. Like, okay, when are we going to be able to buy this? When are we going to be able to get this like local product? So there's an appetite out there for sure for like weed that's produced close to where you are. And I'm sure that's the same for everywhere else in the province. And we're definitely like, if we could get access to that, we would certainly be selling it. And we're always trying to highlight those things, and it's mostly in the way that we display the products in our stores, and it's in the way that we educate our bud tenders. But those are definitely the biggest ways that we can highlight those things to the people coming into the store.
Do you think that the direct delivery program that the BCLDB is working on implementing right now, or will be implementing sometime next year, it sounds like, do you think that will have a big impact for retailers wanting to showcase and highlight local product like that?
Oh, absolutely. Like that's kind of one of the biggest challenges for retailers right now, is like we're all selling the same stuff. Like we're all buying it off the same wholesaler, which, there's a lot of advantages to that for us, because, we just go to one website and that's where everything is. But then if you want to if you're in a crowded market and you want to differentiate yourself from the other stores in town, like, that's where you can get into like only selling craft or only selling this type of product. And I think it's going to be a total game changer. Like right now, one of the hardest things is like a new SKU will come out from like a craft operation, and you'll only be able to order like one case of 12 of them in a week. And like that's going to be gone in like 2 days, right? Like if it's really hot, if it's a really hot product, like if it's a really good grower and everyone knows about it, because like people tend to, like we've been talking about, there's definitely like a culture within the weed smoking community, and so people know like who the good producers are to a certain extent, and they're looking for it and they're waiting for it. And like, maybe they're on like whatever Reddit or something, some message board, and they found out that there's going to be a drop. And so those kind of like sought after items are like, they tend to go super fast. And because we can only get access to so few most of the time, it's really hard to it's hard to keep that consistency. Like people know basically when our order date is, and they're showing up on that day, and they're like buying up all the product, which is, it's super cool, like especially for the producers, but like just being able to like consistently be able to stock those things. And I think we're going to get that opportunity with this direct delivery. That's going to be a total game changer for all of us.
Yeah, I think, specifically as Alfred mentioned, like differentiating ourselves in market right now is really challenging, especially like given the like distribution and some challenges that we're facing in BC surrounding like license density. I mean, the problem is that we haven't been able to like carve out niches because it's just not a possibility given the distribution apparatus that we have right now. And the other thing that is, something that I find disturbing about the whole centralized distribution situation is that, that volume, low cost, high THC model is what, a significant percentage of the consumer market might be interested in. So that's great. That market is being, grossly overserviced right now, leaving, a more sophisticated consumer. I'm sorry, I don't want to be like, pejorative or like praising, but like as somebody who has a potentially more experience, let's put it that way, someone who's a more experienced cannabis consumer,
or just doesn't care about getting blasted.
I was talking with one of our regulators the other day, and I was like, going into the store right now, what you're saying to me is I have to buy the vodka. right? Like I don't have an option for the equivalent of like a midday beer right now. Like I don't have a 14%, a cultivar that's like, uplifting that might be nice after lunch. I've got a lot of stuff that's going to put me down potentially. And that is not, what everybody's looking for. And I also don't think it's what we should be telling the consumer is, the only option. So hopefully when direct supply comes out, we will have the advantage of, the economy of scale that goes along with those like non-specialized products. So, like the bigger producers will continue to be able to, take advantage and stock those products, but also, create a scenario. If Alfred wants to be 100, mile cannabis store where he only carries cannabis that comes from within 100 kilometers, I guess, but even more appropriate.
Use Canadianisms. Canadianisms, Jaclynn.
If he wants to do that, he can't do that right now, right? Like he just can't. I'm dropping all sorts of some balmos here. But seriously, like he can't do that right now. That's not an option for Alfred. But hopefully, when direct supply rolls out, things like. Our small scale producers who are extraordinarily talented people who've been, potentially doing this for a long time, who are doing it at a craft level where there's a lot of care and a lot of like time that goes into it. I mean, the exclusivity and the small batch nature of those products is going to become a feature, not a bug, right? Like right now it's a bug for them because they can't get to the place where they need to be for volume for, a big centralized distribution apparatus. Yeah. But that doesn't matter if they have 4 stores who are devoted to them and take all their product every single time. And that's what I'm hoping will materialize when we see direct supply come down the pipe.
I would love to see that too. Yeah. So we are at 10:15 here, 10:16 actually, which means it's questions time. We have 3 questions. Please go upvote them. Since we only have 3 and we got plenty of time for that, before we shift to that, and as well, if you were in the audience here and have a question you didn't ask, go ask it now because we'll have time to get that in here. Are there any kind of closing thoughts or remarks or thing, like just an idea that you think is really critical to get across here to our audience that you think it's just really critical for the health and vibrancy of the retail space in the craft cannabis world?
I mean, I'm hoping that there's going to be a lot more craft growers that actually can get their license, and I'm hoping that process is sped up for sure. And I think that some of the things we've been talking about, like that are really going to help that are, not getting licenses, but help the already existing licensees is, direct supply and farm gate, because obviously those things are going to increase their access to revenue, right? And increase the availability for us to actually be able to stock them in our store. So yeah, just getting more, like we have such a great legacy market in BC, like we're world renowned for
BC bud is known everywhere.
Exactly. Like, if you ever traveled around, like I remember telling people where I was from, and that was basically the first thing that they said was, oh yeah, BC weed, sweet. So being able to stay on top of that and being able to get all those growers that were in the legacy market into the legal framework would be amazing. Like that's the main thing I think that our government should be focused on a provincial level.
I find that really interesting that's as somebody who is a retail store owner and part of ACCRES, that's what you think is one of the most critical things. That's really interesting, I think, and I agree. I think that is a very important thing too. Jaclynn, any last thoughts from you?
I think that Alfred, hit the nail on the head. The thing is, this is a holistic situation, right? Like what impacts the producers directly impacts the retailers. Like there is no separation between the two of us, so if we're not being successful in creating a framework for the producers for them to be, viable businesses, the retailers are going to suffer because of that. Market consolidation is not good for either the retail apparatus nor for the public, in my opinion. So those are, definitely something that I would leave there. The other thing that I think would be incredible, and this has, been my pie in the sky pipe dream since the day I started doing this work, would be to get this file out of the hands of health and public safety ministries. I don't think that they're appropriate tools to regulate this sector. I think that this is fundamentally an agricultural activity. So I think that it would be really nice for us to focus on, instead of, I think we've demonstrated that the legalization of cannabis hasn't had any, unintended consequences of, an explosion of youth access or, massive changes in the way that people are consuming cannabis. So let's stop focusing on, those like stigma-based fears and start focusing on the potential of the market. We're in a position where we have a lot of, we've got a lot of things to pay for and a lot of things to fix, in the next 5 to 10 years. And cannabis has an incredible potential, not only as an economic driver, but also as an environmental tool. Like we're missing opportunities on so many different fronts because we're still afraid of what we have done, I think, as a nation. Like I think that potentially we weren't necessarily, our political class wasn't really necessarily ready for what happened. It was a surprise to a lot of folks, but I think it would be really amazing to see that mindset start to shift. And embracing this sector is something that can be a benefit to everybody, all Canadians, especially British Columbians. So that's what I would leave you with.
Cool. Well, thank you both so much. Let's shift over to the audience questions. All right. So first up, we have a question from Scott Wilkins, and he says, "What has been / is the biggest challenge about getting quality, consistent selling products?"
Yeah, that's a good question. It's kind of two things I would say. Like the first one is maybe, we can't try before we buy, which is a little bit unfortunate. It'd be nice to be able to get access to like samples and like see it, directly. And then the other part of that is just the access to like, having, like I was talking about before, only being able to buy like a certain amount of something. Like, we can only get like, and I understand that there's a limited quantity, but I think that sometimes when the LDB is evaluating things, they need to maybe take into it. I think they just have a hard time knowing what is really good and what is really popular sometimes. And I totally understand why that is, because there are quite a few products out there. Just maybe like listening to the numbers a little bit more and possibly listening to us a little bit more and being able to stock things a bit better. And I think that direct supply is going to address that issue. So hopefully that'll kind of take it out of their hands and put it more into our hands, and we'll be able to get what we're looking for and form those relationships with producers where we can actually keep things in consistently. At the start, another part of that too was just there wasn't a lot of variety. Like we only had like the Auroras and the Tweeds of the world or whatever. And that was, that was a little bit tough at first because they're putting out certain products, and for some people that's really great. But for people that have, are looking for something a little bit, have been smoking weed for a long time, they're definitely looking for something different. And
that's a very politically correct way to frame.
I'm not there stuff.
You don't want to say anything. It's very directly bad. I commend that.
And I think it's important for us to remember, in response to that question, Scott, like part of this is, there is a mandate on the part of a crown corporation who's doing this wholesale buying, right? Like their mandate is to be profitable or to be as non-losing money as possible. So, that means that there is a lot of, the consideration here is mostly about price point, right? And how do we get low price point? Volume. Like that's it, economy of scale. And that is a huge challenge, I think, because if you have like with the product that Alfred is talking about, and it's an exciting new product with like an interesting terpene profile from a new cultivator, and you're able to get access to that product one time, but then the LDB decides not to bring it back because there's a lower cost product that's maybe in a similar kind of category or whatever. That sucks, right? Like it's really hard for my retailers to explain to the public why they can't get their hands on that really great, smoke that they had last Tuesday. It's just not available anymore. And again, these are things that, help with consumer confidence, because part of the, the thing about bringing people back into the store again and again is having those products consistently. Like if I go to the liquor store and I want to buy a I don't know, Tito's vodka, and they only have it every 5 months, and I have to like go every day to check, and it's like super hit or miss, chances are I'm probably not going to go looking for Tito's vodka anymore, right? Like I'm just going to be like, this is annoying and inconvenient, I'm not going to do it. So I think that's another real challenge that we've had, is that, you know, our priorities are maybe not the same as our distributors' priorities from a product perspective.
And Earl Oliver in the chat is sharing that his product was being rationed, and that he found it very annoying that stores were selling his products aggressively, but they could only buy a case a week. And we've heard this from a few of our craft growers that we work with who make fire product, who stores really want to carry their product, but then the BCLDP is only buying a tiny amount from them. And it's like, but here are all these stores that I sent you that want to buy my product. Why aren't you buying more than 3 cases from me, or whatever might be that the BCLDP is limiting at?
And Sami, like as an organization, ACCRES literally, like we've had multiple micros come to us, and I refer those micros to my retailers, and they have conversations with the product with the retailers about the product they're going to bring to market, and then my retailers will like sign letters of endorsement saying, if you bring this product into your distribution system, I will buy it. Like there's no risk here.
Yeah.
We're committed. And, you know, we had a number of conversations with the LDB about, you know, potentially, you know, ways that we could do that in advance of direct supply. But I mean, it is a huge challenge, because even with those letters of endorsement, even with that, like, you know, solid, you know, backing from, you know, existing retailers, micros still struggle, you know, to get the product in the door. You know, like we were talking with the LDB, one of the conversations that we had with them was why they needed more than one of each kind of cultivar. And you know, that was a real conversation. The way that I said this to them was like, I don't go into the liquor store and ask for the Merlot. Like that's not a thing that I do. There's not one. There are a plethora of them. And so that kind of thing, like that learning curve on the part of our distributor has also made it challenging, to getting those quality and consistent products. So,
yeah,
awesome.
If I could just even add one last thing to that question too, even just having access to different sizing formats, that's also been a big issue for us, like especially for craft stuff. Like there's like very few ounces that I could buy of craft stuff. And I mean that like there's people that don't, like, you know, people that have been smoking weed for a while, they don't come into the store to buy an eighth. Like they're coming in there to buy a half ounce at the minimum. So if they have to buy it in eighth quantities, it's like, that's just so discouraging, right?
Yeah.
So I mean that's also another thing I would add to that.
Cool. Appreciate the really thorough answers there. Lots of interesting tidbits. Mark Pinkowski, sorry if I butchered your last name there, asks, what's ACCRES' position on Indigenous nations creating their own licensing regime and operating stores through a so-called red market?
Alfred, do you want me to take that?
Sure.
Okay, so you know, our official position, you know, through ACCRES is that, you know, Indigenous folks, you know, via the introduction of UNDRIP, have a right to assert their sovereign, you know, their sovereign governance over the territory that they, you know, are occupying. So I think that's a very fraught question. I don't feel like I'm in a place to dictate to, you know, people whose sovereignty has been recognized, what they should and should not be doing. So what I would say is, what I would hope for is, you know, an active effort on the part of our government, the BC government, to integrate with those nations and encourage them to participate in the regulated system. I think that it is telling that there are, you know, Indigenous nations that are not even remotely interested in participating in a regulated framework and would like to create their own. I think that is something that we should be looking really hard at as to what the reasons are behind that inclination. But yeah, like I said, I think that there's an opportunity for our government to, you know, have, you know, intergovernmental relations with Indigenous folks who are trying to do this as an assertion of their own sovereign rights. And I would like to see something that was, you know, parallel, but had a self-governance component to it, you know, emerge that was integrated into the federal and provincial distribution systems. I think that would be really appropriate. You know, it's hard to have this conversation, obviously, because especially in British Columbia, we have a very long history on the Indigenous file of, stepping on the rights of our Indigenous citizens. And I don't think that, we as a sector want to be a part of that. I think that it would be much more appropriate and much more exciting, frankly, to work to build partnerships. So that's where we stand as an association on that particular issue.
Cool. Thank you for that. And last question we have from Linda Domi. I don't know how to pronounce your last name, Linda. I think it's Domier, but you could correct this next week when you are a guest on the CertiCraft. She asks, how do you feel about the potential that Farmgate might be able to sell all the same products that you do in the retail sector?
Yeah, it's kind of a tough one for us. We've polled our members about that, and like the overwhelming answer from our members is we want Farmgate to happen, but it's hard for us to support them selling all the exact same products that we're selling. Like, we definitely want them to be able to sell their products and sell other craft products, kind of like in the same vein as craft breweries. But it is kind of a tough one for our members to swallow. We already have so much competition from so many fronts, and to open that up with Farmgate too would be tough for us. So I think that's the kind of the short answer to that. I don't know if you want to add to that, Jaclynn.
Wait, can I just ask a clarification question first? So from the polling that you've done of your membership, if there was, let's say there's like a little pocket of like 5 or 6 different producers in a particular valley here in the Kootenays, and they were to band together to create a Farmgate store that has all 6 of their products. Is that something that would feel good to your membership because it's all local, all just the producers in the area?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, that's something we actually asked those specific questions, and that was something that our members were in favor of. Being able to sell every single product that we sell was something they weren't in favor of overwhelmingly. But yeah, that kind of situation that's something that we're all, that's something we want to see and we're hopeful for.
Okay.
We want Farmgate to be rolled out in a way that's viable. Like, that is important. We don't want to, roll out a program that means that you build out a Farmgate store and then nobody wants to visit it. That would be terrible. But like I've said directly to the LCRB and to the secretary that I would not be supportive of policy that allowed for just a straight retail license being plopped on a production site. I don't see the point of doing that. I feel like the point of Farmgate is to showcase, local products that are being locally produced and grown. And I think that it would be really amazing, the scenario that you described, Sami, because, a lot of these production sites are not suited for public access or retail. Like, a lot of them are industrial parks or out in the middle of nowhere or whatever. So if you have one that is a really awesome opportunity to aggregate product from, say, like a 50-kilometer radius, I'm personally very in favor of that kind of model. I think that that's great. Replicates like a winery or a craft, brewing kind of like model. But I don't think that just plopping another retail store apparatus is going to be viable, like in most circumstances. I just don't really see why you would want to do that. I don't think that there are many people who are going to drive out of their way to make a destination stop to buy the same thing that they can buy in their town, like in the at the store in town. Like, that doesn't seem to be something that, as a consumer, that I would find appealing. And I think that we don't need that kind of additional overlay. There's no necessity for it, and I don't really see the economic advantage. Because, like I said, I see the benefit of Farmgate being to create a tourist destination, in combination with a sales apparatus, apparel, events, and consumption options. Like, all of those things together, like, if we're able to, prompt the government to allow for those things from a Farmgate perspective, then we don't really need a generic retail outlet, because we have a whole bunch of other things that make that model viable, that are way more interesting, way more exciting, and way more innovative, and way more appealing, in my opinion, to the public. So,
yeah. We're already kind of starting to struggle with license density in BC in terms of retailers. So this would just be another thing that makes that density even, it's a lot harder for our members, for sure.
Mm-hmm. We have one more question that came in from Earl here. Do you guys have time for one more?
Yeah, for sure.
Awesome. So Earl asks, or one sec, let me hit I'm done for this one. Earl asks, what is ACCRES' position on the increasing pay-to-play pressure, particularly outside of BC? While independent retailers overwhelmingly reject pay-to-play models, many retailers seek relationships with LPs to carry their products. This disproportionately impacts small growers. Thoughts?
When you say pay to play, just like for some clarification, like you're talking about them actually giving us things to sell their product. Am I correct in understanding
like shelf space incentive programs? So like, you give me X amount of like SKUs and shelf space and I'll compensate you by giving you XYZ.
Right.
He says pay money to carry products in the chat, i.e. buy your data. You have to buy our data in order for us to carry your product.
Exactly.
Right. I see what you're saying. I guess I've never actually experienced this personally, so it's maybe a tougher one for me to answer. But I mean, like in our stores, we definitely like to support the underdogs, I guess you could say. And we don't tend to put up any of the advertising. They send us so many things. It's crazy. Like we have to just tell them to stop sending us stuff. But I could see why you would be concerned about that. Like, definitely that's going to be more of a problem moving forward. I don't know how you combat that, because there's just so much communication between, the retailers and the LPs. But yeah, I mean, I'm a huge supporter of BC cannabis, and especially like the small craft growers. So it's definitely something. Yeah, it's too bad. I hope that there can be something put in place to kind of stop that, but I'm not sure what the solution is there. I don't know.
Well, inducements are illegal in BC currently, so like that is not something that should technically be happening. Like you're not allowed to pay for shelf space in British Columbia technically, but they are having this conversation in Ontario. They're looking at creating a regulatory framework that allows for this. We've seen this in groceries. We've seen it in liquor. It's a standard model. And I think that it is unfortunate that it is, permeating the cannabis sector because, I mean, it's a symptom of a race to the bottom. It's not a symptom of, quality product. It's not a symptom of any of that stuff. It's a symptom of, really extreme downward market pressures, which are, based on tax burden and, buy-in from the public and blah, 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 blah. And so I think that, the inducements are not necessary if we have a healthy market that is populated by a whole bunch of different kinds of businesses. And I think that this is a really good kind of way to highlight how important it is for us to, value and foster our independence. Right, especially on the retail front, because Alfred is his own master, right? He doesn't answer to a board, he doesn't answer to shareholders or any of that stuff. He is an independent business owner that gets to make decisions based on what he wants in his store. And so I think that it's really important that we protect that diversity in the market, because there are going to be a lot of different kinds of approaches to cannabis retail. There are going to be people who approach this as a massive, low margin, high volume, commodity style, shopping environment, which is fine and dandy. That's cool. And then there are going to be people who are really focused on providing the best experience and the best quality product. And, inducements are going to be secondary to those folks. And so to me, that is, I think is really important. And I think Ontario is a really good example of that, like market crunch, where we have, a lot of players in the market. We're starting to see consolidation and people are like scrambling for the advantage. And, this is what they've landed on because it's something that we see in other sectors, grocery and liquor. So I don't think it is positive necessarily for the industry. I think that it is going to make the lives of small scale producers really hard because there's no effing way that they can compete meaningfully with large publicly traded companies. And so I would not be supportive of a policy change in BC that would allow for active inducements. I think that would be really detrimental. And I mean, like maybe, in 10 years when we have a mature market and we've sorted out all of the issues that we've been facing, that might be a conversation to be had, but I think it's really premature right now. to see that rolling out.
Awesome, guys. Well, thank you so much for being here today. I really, really appreciate all the insight and the knowledge you guys have shared. Thanks for answering all those questions. To all of you in the audience, if you're curious about the next DataCraft in 2 weeks, episode 11, we have Scott Wilkins and Linda, again, your last name, Domier. They'll both be our guests next time. They both have a lot of experience in the world of insurance for cannabis, and this is a topic that was actually requested. There was 1 or 2 times ago we had a call out for what do you guys want to see, and one of the single most popular thing that people wanted to see was a DataCraft on insurance. So we are making that happen now. Scott has a history in this world of cannabis. I know he was involved in some of the landmark cases that went to the Supreme Court around medical cannabis in the past, and he was working as an insurance broker for many years. He doesn't anymore. Now he is launching a licensed production facility, and his wife Linda is actively working as an insurance broker today. So two very interesting perspectives from an amazing couple there, and really excited to have them on board next week. And both of you have also consistently been audience members in these shows, so thank you for always coming and asking great questions and participating in the chats. This is the DataCraft. Thank you guys for being here. We've had ACCRES with Alfred and Jaclynn here today. For those of you watching this on YouTube, hit that like and subscribe button. I'm getting better at doing this every time now.
Sammy, can I jump in and plug something? Or we're doing something.
Please do.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, please do.
So,
what do you want to plug?
We're going to be hosting a symposium, so a State of Craft in BC conference on September 18th and 19th. Coming up here. So we would love to have your audience members join us. Tickets are available on Eventbrite. You can take a look at our Twitter at acres_.ca for information. There'll be a link in the bio. And we're going to have a number of panels and roundtable discussions. We've invited our regulator, the LDB, and we've also asked the minister, Minister Farnworth, to potentially come and chat with us as our keynote. So fingers crossed he shows up. And yeah, it'll be a trade show. It'll be a party. We're going to have consumption spaces. I would love to see everybody join us for this fun event. I think it'll be a great one.
And Nick shared a link to the Eventbrite to get tickets there in the chat if you are curious to check that out. Thank you, everybody. I'm going to end this event now. What'll happen is after 30 to 60 seconds or so, it'll automatically replay. So if you joined late and you really want to see the start of this, just stick around after it ends and you'll be able to watch the beginning. Yeah, we'll get it live on YouTube sometime in the next few days or early next week. Thank you, everybody. Hope you all have a wonderful day.
Thanks, Sammy. Bye.
Sammy.